Hi, you're watching Holistic Developer Channel. I'm Anna, and this is part 2 of how did I get an interview with Microsoft and how the on-site interviews actually happened. If you're interested in the very first part, how did I actually land the interview with Microsoft, make sure to watch part 1 of the series. It's a previous video. And in this video, I'll share with you how did actually my on-site interview went. Obviously, we are during pandemic, so the on-site interviews, they were actually virtual on-site. And in my case, I didn't had an actual technical interview in between. I immediately was promoted to go to the on-site interview. And in my case, I had 4 interviews, and that was coding or data structures and algorithms. So it was a coding interview. I had a system design interview. I had a behavioral interview, and I had a front end or UI interview. So I will start with the coding one because that was the one that I spent a lot of time to prepare, a lot of time to focus and make sure that I'm ready for it. And for me to prepare for that interview, I did Algo Expert, but what I really liked, I liked this course on Educative, that is Algo Patterns. It helped me a lot to not just do thousands or hundreds of coding problems on LeetCode or HackerRank or something like that, but it helped me actually see when I get a problem, I see a pattern and apply it from the 16 patterns that they are known to apply the correct pattern. So that was what worked for me. So that's what I did to prepare for my coding interview. What was the coding interview? It was an hour long. So every interview, the on-site interview with Microsoft, every single one of them was 1 hour long. Starting with the coding interview, it was with the hiring manager. It's the hiring manager that I already previously had a call, previously told me what to expect for the interviews, what to prepare for, and so on. So during that interview, we started with a problem. We didn't do any introduction or anything like that because we already knew ourselves, what we previously spoke. He gave me a simple warming up coding challenge, which I was able to solve. There was like the problem prompt he gave me. It was kind of explanatory, but I decided anyways to rephrase it, to say, I'm understanding that you're asking me to do this and that and that. Here are my assumptions. I asked for clarifications. I really quickly did a pseudocode strategy and so on, and then we moved on and actually to write the code, and that took probably 10 minutes or something like that. And I solved that correctly. It was kind of a warm-up. I would agree that it's a warm-up. It was not really complicated anything. Then we moved on to the coding problem that he wanted to see me coding. And obviously, I did kind of the same things, the stages that you do when you get a prompt. You make sure that you read it, you understand it, you ask your clarification questions, you clarify your assumptions, you restate the problem, making sure that you know that you are correctly understanding what is being asked of you. I did the pseudocode, and then I asked if it's okay for me to start to code. Before I did that, I said I have like a vision for this to be solved in 2 ways, like one using sets and another one is using an object or a map. And I told like what are the pros and cons of doing either of those, and I said that I will go with the object one. And it looked like the interviewer liked that idea, so I moved on and solving the problem with doing that. And while I was doing a problem, I think I had one clarification question that I wanted to clarify, making sure that it's correct. He said, yes, it's correct. So I solved the problem. Obviously, after that, I walked the code with an example and see how it works. Everything worked fine. And I asked the interviewer if he had any clarifying questions or something that he would like me to do, try to optimize it or something like that. And he said, everything looks great. There's no need for optimizing it because I already solved it in the most optimal way. And he told me that in comparison with other people he interviewed, the other candidates went with the approach of actually solving that problem with nested loops. So it had nested 2 for loops, and I went with the approach of solving that. Actually, I had 2 methods. So I had a helper method and the main method that I had, and I used dictionary. So it was no need for me to actually have nested loops. So my complexity of the implementation was linear in comparison with n of at the power of 2 in the cases of a nested loop. So that being said, he really liked the way that I approached it. He liked that I solved it. So hearing that feedback immediately, I felt really good, because I was the most concerned and anxious about the coding interview, and I'm really happy that I actually did I did the course, the algo patterns, that I really, really like the coding interview patterns or something like that it's called. It helped me a lot. System design interview, and actually the very first minutes was the introduction. Here who I am, here's what I do, here's the structure of the interview that we have, and at the end we'll have questions. So as a normal, right? So it was 1 hour interview. It was a person who actually focused on the back end, didn't had any front-end experience or anything like that. So the question that he asked me is that he asked me to talk about the project that I'm most proud of. And that's what I did. I was really happy with that. So I shared with him the project that I'm most happy with, why I liked it that much, what were my concerns, what were my constraints, what were my challenges, and so on. He also asked me to show him my database structure. I showed him the database. He saw that it's normalized. He asked me to show him how did I do the React components. He never done React. He asked me to explain, and I explained to him what is React. Here's how my components are created, and so on. He's like, oh, now I kind of understand a little bit React. Thank you for the explanation. That was his answer. And then we moved on to actually answer questions like, okay, now you want to scale your application. Now you have thousands and millions of users. How would you do this? And I started to tell him about load balancer, about caching, and all of that nitty-gritty stuff about system design. Prior to that, I remember he asked me about how would I deploy my application, how I would get an URL and stuff like that. So I answered those questions. I already had my application deployed, so it's live on Heroku and so on. So the overall system design went really well. I felt really good. I answered all of these questions, and I could get the signal from him that he really liked how the interview went. It actually felt like more conversation of people that are interested on the same topic. I really, really liked it. Then we asked questions. He shared about the fact that he started book club, and we started to chat about our favorite book and software engineering, which was clean code. So we kind of bonded there. It was really good. So I felt like 10 out of 10. That interview, we went 10 out of 10. And if I were to mention the previous interview, the coding interview, I felt that was also 10 out of 10. So I felt really, really good so far about those 2 interviews. I started to do the behavioral. Again, it's an introduction. Here's what the interview is about, and we'll have questions at the end, and they will be asking questions. So I got a lot of questions like, what is your challenge? How do you deal with conflicts? Stuff like that. And at the end, after I was asked, I don't know, probably 5 or 6, 7 behavioral questions, and I think, in my opinion, I answered correctly to all of them. It's not that there is a correct answer or wrong answer, is that there's not one way to answer that. The goal is that to demonstrate that you have soft skills, that you have that growth mindset, and so on. So I asked him if there's anything that he would like me to clarify or answer anything, because we had a couple more minutes, and he said that his goal was to see that that I have a mindset, and he said, obviously you do have signals that you have a growth mindset. We see that he said he sees that I might be good fit for the role, so I really, really like to hear that. He asked me also kind of one of the final questions, like how would my coworkers will describe me, and I was straight with him, and I said I will try to answer how like they will describe, and I gave an example. But I told him, like, if you want to see real feedback from or recommendations from people that I work with, try to check out my LinkedIn profile and the recommendation section. And he said that he will do that. And actually next day he actually did check out my LinkedIn profile, and I assumed he looked at the recommendation sections. And during that interview, honestly, I was asked about to create a component, a web component that was definitely really easy to do. And the challenge there was that it was required to be only in CSS and HTML. Don't use anything like that. And that's where things kind of got not as it was with the previous interviews, because I haven't done CSS and HTML in a very long time. I would say pure CSS and HTML, because everything that I've done for a couple of months, it was React. And actually that was what it was required for this job. I will put the job requirements somewhere here. You can watch what was the actual requirements. So nowhere was HTML, CSS or something like that. It was React knowledge required. I didn't prepare for that at all. I did get my best shot at that. I did create the HTML, I created component, I styled it in CSS, and I got a question from him kind of directing me into the direction that they wanted to do for me to go, because I started to do like font size, colors, and so on. He wanted me to focus more on how I would position everything. So I started to tell him that there are couple ways of doing that. I could try to do a flex, I could try to do a grid and so on, but I could not remember everything, because in my case, when I do CSS or HTML or anything like that, I always have something that my screen is split. I have the section where is the code and the section where I see the result. So when I do something in CSS, I immediately see how that looks and I adjust as it needed. So I never actually try to memorize everything that CSS does or in HTML or anything like that. I just have the general idea. So here, that's where I kind of sucked. I didn't remember a lot of stuff, so that's where it went south. But that doesn't mean that I didn't do the interview well. Actually, I would say that I would give it probably a 7 or an 8 out of 10. So I did solve the problem. I did create it, but it was probably not as straightforward or seamless as he would have expected. So obviously I was kind of disappointed. The interviews were over, 4 interviews, so I would say the very first one, the coding, was 10 out of 10 in my opinion. The system design was 10 out of 10. The behavioral, probably it was a 9 or a 10 also. And the UI was kind of a 7 or 8 out of 10. So anyways, I felt pretty good about it. I was so happy how the interviews went. I was ecstatic. Certain level, I was still worried about the UI, but I was calming myself with remembering the conversation with the hiring manager that I had. He told me that it's like the job is focusing like 80% on the back end and 20% on the front end. So I did really good at the coding challenge, system design. So I was still having really high hopes, and actually went to the extent and buy a champagne to celebrate.
Champagne?
Yeah.
Champagne. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was so happy how the interviews went. I felt really good. And honestly, from all the technical interviews that I had, this was the best. Honestly, interviewing, the on-site interview with Microsoft, how I performed, how everything went, this was the best. So I was really confident that I got the interview really well, and it's a high potential for me to get the job. So I was really, really happy. Then, during the same time, probably a few days or so, well, actually, let me stop there and go back one step. I was told that I'll hear in the next week or so the result. What did I do naturally after that? The next day, I email a thank you note to every single person that I interview with, and I made sure to make them personalized, like what we talked about and so on. So those emails were really good, and I definitely recommend you to do something like that as well if you're in the interviewing process. Moving to the part that I was trying to get to, it was that during that time, obviously, I was interviewing with other companies as well because it was during my job seeking marathon time, and I did happen to get an offer. Like the next, I interviewed with Microsoft on Tuesday, and on Thursday, I got an offer from a different company, and the offer was really good. I'll be honest. So naturally, I needed to know what to do about Microsoft because I felt really good about that interview. It went really well. Let me drink a cup of water. So where was I? I was saying that the interview with Microsoft went really well. So I still had high hopes. It was my top choice. And I obviously emailed the recruiter and the hiring manager with the Microsoft team, and I told them the situation, that I got an offer. Obviously, they are my top choice. Asked if there's anything that I can clarify or anything that I can help to make the decision. And I got an automatic reply that the hiring manager is on vacation. So I waited for his reply until next Tuesday. That's when he replied, and he told me that they are towards the end of the interviewing process, and there are still a few candidates that they are evaluating. That means that I'm still in the game. I was happy about it. It was not a no, it was a potentially yes. So I was still happy about that, and I was really, really excited because the people I interviewed with, I liked that. I liked the position. It was something that allowed me to continue growing, because it was backend. It's something that I was already familiar with. I have 8 years of experience with backend, and the potential of growing and learning more front end, I haven't done that professionally. So I was really, really feeling good about that. I liked the potential of working for Azure.com, learn cloud computing and so on. I asked for an extension with the job offer that I had. I told them that I still have a few companies that I'm interviewing with, and I want to see that through, and they gave me like 10 more days to provide them an answer and so on. So it was another week before I heard anything from Microsoft. So the situation was that I got an email from Microsoft, and it says, sorry, we are not going forward with you. And when I got that email, it was immediately really disappointing. It was really hard for me. So I went to the job action board on Microsoft site and decided to look what is the status of the interview. And when I check, I see that they're still in interviews, and that didn't make sense to me. And then I started to look at the job numbers, and I realized that reply that I got, it was for a different Microsoft role that I applied with. So that was the one that I didn't even interview with, and they decided not to go with me, and that makes sense. And I was like, oh my God, I'm still in the game. I was like, oh, okay, good. I didn't hear a no from them. And at that time, I remember thinking, like, this will be funny to tell. Like, next time when I hear from Microsoft, it will be from this role, and it will be that I got the job, and I thought that is not because of this. So that were my thoughts. So in a day or two from that email, I did actually get the reply from Microsoft, and it was from the recruiter at this time, saying that they decided to move on with somebody else. And that was a failure for me, and it was a really, really hard failure for me to accept. And I knew it was not the first failure in tech or in my interview process. During interviews, you have a lot of failures coming at you in a really fast pace, bombing you from different directions. Some are easy to swallow, some are not so easy to swallow. And this was the failure that was not easy for me to swallow. And the reasons where it was not easy for me to swallow it was because it was something that I felt that I did really well. I did really well, and probably things that went south. It was the UI interview, the front end interview, and yeah, it is what it is. It was really hard for me to process the information and get past this failure. What I want to say, I didn't accept that other job towards that time when I actually got this failure, what got me out of this, it was that I had other interviews, and actually a lot of them turned out in offers. So that was something that helped me get out of that kind of down, feeling rejected, feeling that you're not good or something like that. And I realized that it was not that I was not good. It was just probably somebody stacked better based on the role, the experience that they had, and so on. And I realized that doesn't represent me. That doesn't mean that I would have not been able to do that job really well. The moral of the story is that you get a lot of failures, and sometimes when they're not even expected, sometimes when you think that you did really good and you think that it will result in something positive, it turns out that is a negative. And as I said, I had other offers, and honestly, truly honestly, I did not as good at those interviews as I did with Microsoft, and I got offers. So you never know. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that do your best. What can you control is that you can prepare and do your best and perform best. Do what you can during those interviews. And the things that you cannot control, try not to obsess over them and try not to take them to heart so much. I know it's not easy, but it's something that you cannot control. I hope this experience, my experience, provided some perspective or clarity, and I'm sharing this experience with you, hoping that it will serve you, and hopefully it will provide you some clarity and it will help you in your interviewing process. And if you know somebody who will appreciate it, somebody who might find it useful, make sure to share it with them. Make sure to like it, comment. I'm curious to hear how many of you found yourself in a situation where you did really well in an interview and you were sure that it will be a yes and it turned out to be a no. Like, how many times did you find yourself in that situation and what did you do to get out of it? I'll really appreciate seeing your comments on that matter. As always, thank you very much to be here. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you for watching. It means a lot to me, and I will see you in the next video.